Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Good. We're going to try to stop Mike Johnson and his friends from winning out. He has allies in Congress. Did you know that?
Yeah, he does.
And
more and more.
He wants to accelerate the war, and he wants to be a hawk, and he already has a lot of support. But the worst part about it, when I was reading about this, and you'll be shocked about this, but it's bipartisan.
Yeah.
There's hawks in both parties, and there's money that goes back and forth in both parties. So that to me is a real shame. But the big issue is, should that Johnson and the United States get permission or give permission to Zelensky to use our taxpayers' money, our bombs that we send over there for people to make profits, in order for them to bomb exactly where they're going to bomb is up for grabs, but bombing Russian property and territory, which is a major step, and the Russians have already warned about this. So it's something that I think it's not hard to figure out why this may accelerate. You know, when we think about these things, I at least often ask the question, don't they know better? Don't they know there's a downside to this? But it never changed him. Graham never changed his mind. If you try to think, I have the best logical argument against Graham's position, but he just digs in deeper. So the logic at certain points, when I think they're just determined that they don't want to hear the truth, and they're going to define what truth is. And in this case, they want the taxpayers to cough up. Not that the American taxpayer hasn't coughed up enough, and we want to expand it because they know they're losing the war, and but in the meantime, we got to get as much money out of this as possible. Maybe we can keep the war going, and they did it for 20 years in Afghanistan, and look along the tragedy occurred in Vietnam. So. This takes a lot of people speaking out. I hope there's going to be some resistance to this.
Yeah, I mean, Speaker Johnson just continues to disappoint day after day. I mean, he's literally not interested in the job of running the House of Representatives, of getting normal order, of passing bills, of doing his work. He's interested only in grandstanding and getting heavily involved in foreign policy, in pushing his warlike, hawk-like positions onto the rest of the House. Not that many of them need any pushing, but he rose to power because of a good chunk of the GOP's frustration with then Speaker McCarthy and Speaker McCarthy's willingness to give more money and more weapons to Ukraine. They didn't like him prioritizing it the way it was done, and so he was deposed. And then here comes Speaker Johnson, who makes McCarthy look like a peacenik, in comparison. Now let's put this up. This is from Axios. We saw it on antiwar.com. Originally, Speaker Johnson backs call to let Ukraine strike targets in Russia with U.S. weapons. And that's what it's all about. Now go to the next one. This is what we're talking about today. Next clip here. Speaker Mike Johnson on Wednesday backed fellow lawmakers' call for the Defense Department to allow Ukraine to use U.S.-provided weapons on military targets within Russian territory. Why it matters, the Biden administration banned the use of U.S.-made weapons to strike inside Russia in an effort to keep the conflict from escalating. But some have criticized the embargo for restricting Ukraine's ability to effectively defend itself. So giving them a green light to strike deep within Russia, if you kind of imagine a parallel, say that Mexico decides it want to take back Texas. It's become a superpower. It's discovered 80 zillion gallons of barrels of oil, and they became super rich and super militant, and they wanted to take back Texas. And Russia started providing missiles to Mexico, and Mexico started firing Russian missiles into Texas. How would Texans feel? How would Americans feel? It's pretty easy to conclude that we would be pretty irked about this.
In the old days, when wars were more realistic constitutionally, where the people with their Congress declare the war. And yes, it's difficult. Who's going to manage the war? And the founders were very clear. The president has this power. You can't micromanage a war in Congress. And yet, now we're managing a war remotely, and it's a mixture. There's NATO involved. There's a coalition of countries. There's the military-industrial complex, and even already there were restrictions. And actually, what they're asking him to do is urging him to urging him to lift any restrictions on Ukraine's use of U.S. weapons. And you know, the United States will say this all the time: we steal the money from the people. We subsidize the military-industrial complex. We send the money over there, and they say, well, we can't tell them how to fight their wars. We don't want to violate, the position. It's up to them on how they should use all this stolen money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so absurd, but that's the way it's being run, and that's why the condition. And then we have all the other things, the unintended consequences, the actions that happen, the people who have an axe to grind and have a reason for causing more trouble. And it's obviously our viewers understand, what we're talking about, the danger of this. And when it's going smoothly, like in a way, the polling right now. I think it's due to the way they ask polls. The foreign policy is way down on the list of the concerns of the American people.
Yeah.
But what if they knew the spending on that was the most corrupt and one of the biggest reasons why the cost of living is going up and the value of the dollar is going down? They don't get that. So when I see they say nobody cares about foreign policy, that in itself might be propaganda. They're not worried about this war. We have to keep doing it. We're not getting any letters at the Congress about not voting for this.
Yeah, the spending is a big deal, and if Americans understood, that's why their standard of living was going down. But even more worrisome is World War III, and that's what they're trying to egg on.
Right.
Well, here's the letter we're talking about. This was sent by signed by the chairman and the ranking member of the HPSC, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And the second point, I won't show the whole letter. The second point was they are conveying their strong support to authorize the use of U.S.-provided weapons to strike strategic targets within Russian territory under certain circumstances. Strategic targets, that not just a line of troops. Strategic targets within Russia. Go to the next one. Here are the signatories. You see Michael Turner, who is a raving warmongering neocon. But his ranking member, Jim Hines, signed it as well as Connolly. Remember, Connolly is famous for being on the floor saying, Ukraine is our borders, just a few weeks ago. So they sent this letter. All of these guys signed it. And Axios, if you go to the next one, they called up Speaker Johnson, and they said, asked by Voice of America, sorry, VOA called him. Asked by VOA Wednesday if he supports the letter, Johnson said, the attempt to micromanage Ukraine's defense is not a good policy for us. I think we need to allow Ukraine to prosecute the war the way they see fit, Johnson said. They need to be able to fight back. I think we probably agree with that, but we shouldn't send them any weapons.
That's for sure.
Yeah. They can fight however they want.
But those poor people, they would suffer. They won't have an automatic pay raise next year.
Yeah.
And the dividends keep going up in the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to do one last thing on this, Dr. Paul,
right,
which is the Russian reaction, as would be the American reaction that I mentioned earlier. If you go to next, now this is something from antiwar.com from the article. Moscow recently warned the UK if Ukraine used British weapons on Russian territory, Russian forces would target UK military sites in Ukraine, quote, and beyond. The warning came after British Foreign Secretary David Cameron said Ukraine had the right to use British arms in attacks on Russia. So, unlike a lot of our political leaders, regardless of what you think about the Russian leadership and Putin in particular, he's not a real bluffer. He's not like our blustering Lindsey Graham who will go up and bluster. So this is a warning that should be taken seriously. But right after they made this warning, they punctuated it with this next story, if you can put it up. Right after he said, we will strike beyond. So Russia starts exercise to simulate launch of tactical nuclear weapons. And this is near the border of Ukraine. Go to the next one. So Russian forces have started the first stage of exercises ordered by Putin to simulate preparation for the launch of nuclear weapons. So I think this should be taken seriously, but the problem is everyone in Washington is a circular thinking. Oh, he's bluffing. Well, maybe he is. He hasn't bluffed in the past, but is it really worth the risk? Is Ukraine worth the risk of World War III?
To me, it's amazing how they how they doctor this up to make it look like it's a wonderful thing, and then they talk about rights. We have a right to do this, so don't ask any questions. So far removed from what a right is, but they use that as a justification. That is, they have the force to do it. We have the money and the weapons, and we have the people asleep, so they're not going to object. Yeah. But they don't have a right to do it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, the danger continues. Well, the second one we want to talk about quickly, and I sent it over to you because I just thought that the Congress, we always hated it when they would drag the head of Facebook and the head of Google and dragging and screaming at them, you got to do more censorship, you got to do this, you got to do that, just hectoring them. Well, put up the next clip. This is from Politico. So a lot of colleges, there are a lot of protests going on. Sometimes the police would come in and been very heavy-handed. We saw that at UT Austin, where the Texas police came in. We saw it at UCLA and elsewhere. But there were a couple of colleges that were able to negotiate without bringing in the cops and cracking the heads open. But that infuriated the Republicans in Congress. They said, college presidents, how dare you negotiate with students and avoid violence? And so they are bringing them down to D.C., bringing them down to the Capitol to yell at them for finding a peaceful way out of the problem. Now, whether we agree with what they negotiated or not, it just, to me at least, seems a little bit inappropriate for Congress to be sticking its nose in a negotiation that ends in a peaceful settlement.
Well, the Congress is going to continue to do this because they don't have much else to do. They don't know what their real purpose is. The Speaker doesn't know either. But there's an epidemic of members of Congress because that's how they get in the limelight. They get in the limelight because they want to be on a committee that gets to have these hearings and all. And whether it's on the foreign policy, they don't do enough on the people who work at the Fed. Why don't they grill the people on the Fed and bring them down there? But it is epidemic, but it is reflecting the size and scope of government. And the Congress does have, an authority to do this. But why? But they're the ones who created all these laws and everything, whether it's education or medical care you can have, it'll never stop because the management, but they never stop and think, why are we doing so much of it? Well, who passed it all the laws? The Congress passed all this because they've deceived the people into saying, well, you need free health care, and that continues, or free education. And of course this is involved, just think of how distorted this whole college thing is. I mean, how many people, took loans and maybe that's good. The poor people can get a college a degree, and now they're just dumping that debt on the American people. And but it's the creation of these things that are the problem. So when it comes to the foreign policy, I think that's part of it. I just don't like the idea of the government being involved because I think for over 100 years, the progressive system has been, promoted to the American people more so in the recent 50 years or so, where they have been taught this wokeism and wild-eyed socialism and everything else, and then we have to have hearings, and sometimes they get a little messy, and I like to prevent things, and I'd prevent them by, okay, if we have to punish them because they wanted DC funding, I'd say DC funding is what to do. If these people come in here, when those university professors came in there and made all these demands and said, this is how we're going to handle it, and they've destroyed the education at our expense, I say, why don't we do what is constitutional? Take everything away from these universities, and maybe they'll get a better education if they go get a job, a real job.
A lot of them are doing that too, getting better training. Well, let's skip ahead, skip that next one and do the next one. This is just an example of the bullying, I think, on the part of the GOP, which really it's. You're right. I mean, aside from the money, okay, stop giving them money. That would be a boost. But, here's Kevin Kiley from California, Republican from California, hectoring them. Enforce your rules that say no camping on campus, no threatening students, no harassing students, no occupying buildings, he said. What you shouldn't do is negotiate with people who are breaking the law. Well, we kind of do that all the time. So Virginia Fox called the leader spineless and referred to their agreements as shocking concessions to the unlawful anti-Semitic encampments on their campuses. It just seems like a shame that they would condemn, and even just, why don't you just focus on regular order and trying to pass bills and trying to shrink the size of government,
Yeah, to me, though, it's related to something like, can you, if we were in a real war, can all these units micromanage the war? They can't do it, and that's why I think this is it. But we do. It is true. We take a lot of steps, and my position on taxes is I'd vote for an income tax that decreased it by 10%. And as long as it was moving in that direction. But I think the micromanagement of this sort of thing, and then when you get into the difficulties of understanding people to understand what the First Amendment is all about, it gets real messy. But they all have a goal and an axe to grind, and most of the time it's anti-libertarian. It's management. They want to participate in that, and I see this is going to get worse, not better, because I think we're so locked in. But this is coming to an end. People are leaving the system. People are sick and tired of what the universities are doing, and them trying to usher an age of fairness and what they're allowed to say and what they can do. I just am sort of pessimistic about that achieving anything. But there is no doubt I'm all for the negotiations. I get furious when two people come together and then they had the weapons. We're not going to give you weapons unless you don't keep bombing the enemy there. Why don't we just have a pause? So I'm all for all that kind of stuff where you move and stop and want to talk about it. But I guess I'm too pessimistic about promising that, well, if we just change a couple little things, everybody's going to do the right thing, because the people there are not, I don't think they're worthy of the responsibility that they have. There's a lot of good people there, but in the university system, it is, I see it as the enemy of liberty. I don't think the people who graduate from college, they don't have a good feel for what the Constitution is all about, and what economics is all about, what non-interventionist foreign policy is all about, and I think that's where the real problems are.
Yeah, but thousands of them came out to see you, so there are some good eggs in there as well. You broke the records on some of those, even those leftish campuses. So there are some good folks too. Well, we're going to finish on a good news story for a change. Ian Smith, we talked about him during COVID. He had a gym in New Jersey, and New Jersey's Governor Murphy, Republican, real thug, remember, he shut the whole state down, couldn't even move without his permission. Well, Ian Smith said, no, I'm not going to shut my gym down. I'm not going to lose my business. I'm not going to have people get sicker because they can't work out and exercise. And so he faced a lot of problems. Well, put up the next clip. This is from Hedge. Finally, after all this time, Dr. Paul, charges dropped against New Jersey gym owner who defied strict COVID lockdown rules. He got all the charges against him dropped.
No, there's a limit. And I think that's what is coming about, in spite of the things on the surface. It really looks bad, if you look at the monetary system or the foreign policy. But I think definitely, and we've said this quite often, is that there are more and more people waking up. This one has sort of a delayed story. During the lockdown, occasionally we'd see a burst of energy where somebody would get up and say what they were all thinking, but they were intimidated by, just the whole issue that the authorities are for this, what can I do? But when a guy like this stands up, I think it's really remarkable on what happens.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You're exactly right. So how many people just go along to get along? Oh, I'll put on my mask. Oh, I guess I won't go to church. It takes people like him with courage to stand up and say, no, heck no, I won't go. I'm not going to do it. and thank God there were some like that. There were quite a few like that, but he stands out. But here's what he faced. I mean, this is how the government works. Put this next one on. Ian Smith, the owner of Attila's Gym in Belmar. If you can put that next clip on. I just like the beard too anyway, but go to the next one. Here is, he faced more than 80 charges against him and the gym's co-owner. They've been dropped. And this is his quote, and I love this quote. "The support we receive locally, nationally, and internationally for our stand is something I will be forever grateful for. With that being said, I'm thrilled to announce that we have achieved a major victory in the long, hard fight against the state." That's a
wonder
bumper
who said the
sticker.
most charges, he or Trump?
Yeah, really.
They must have been buddies on that deal. But it is magnificent that this happened, because it doesn't happen that often. But it doesn't happen that often that people get arrested for doing simple things like going to church.
Yeah,
you know, oh, what a mess! And just think about, at the time where we have this debt crisis of student loans. What about the things that people have been asked to do and they just don't do it? And I think that this is just wonderful that people are standing up. But there's a point where they reach and there's I've had enough. But the other side is going to terrorize you, and that's a little bit about what's going on. I think with the universities even now is they say, if you don't do it our way, you're going to, instead of me wanting getting a total change, they just want to manage it. They want to make sure they manage their First Amendment, and find out who's the guilty parties are.
Well, you know what they did to Smith and his partner, along with these 80 charges. You know how they rack these up. They rack up the charges, tens and tens, to try to intimidate you to make a plea bargain, right? And he didn't do it. But in addition to that, they try to bankrupt you. Put on this next one. So this is what they try to do as well. Mr. Smith and Mr. Trombetti racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, including a $15,000 per day fine for keeping their gym open. And you go down. However, state officials held steady with the fines. In December 2021, Mr. Smith said they amounted to more than $1.2 million in fines for violating the public health emergency rules. Although he stressed he had no intention of paying them. And then they were arrested. They were arrested on multiple accounts, including fourth-degree contempt. Well, we should have contempt for that court. But the good news story in the end, so he ran for Congress. If you go to the next one, Dr. Paul, he ran for Congress. I think you're going to like some of what he was saying. If you could put that next clip on. That was in 2022. He didn't win. I don't know if we have that next one. It's the last clip. Here we go. His legal win comes after he tried to run for Congress in 22. He didn't win. At the time, he said he planned to run on a platform, and I like this, focused on liberty, small government, and America First policies. He vowed to fight the COVID-19 mandates, soaring illegal immigration, and increase government spending. Here's a quote from him. "For too long, good people have not gotten involved in politics, whether that is because the establishment won't open the door for them or they don't want to participate in the foul world of politics. More than anything, this needs to change, and I want to be part of that change," he said. So I don't know everything about him, but I like the beard. I like the way he has expressed himself against the state.
Well,
so.
he came forward, and he's a leader, and others will be there, and a person like that counts. There's a difference between the count of the leadership and people leading the charge for liberty versus the polling, in a general thing. I still think that's important because attitudes are important, but unfortunately, the general attitude is manipulated by the people who are demagoguing the whole issue, and they think they're going to get something special. Then the mob looks like they're all for this, and then they use the media to try to fool the people into it. But finally, somebody breaks through with this, and that's why I think education is so important. It's caused a lot of our trouble, and that's why I think it's the answer. Also, one of the reasons I have a homeschooling program.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I guess we're ready to close out. We've solved as much as we can today. I want to thank the viewers for watching the program and remind you, if you want to support the Ron Paul Liberty Report, you can go to ronpaulinstitute.org and make a tax-deductible donation to the Ron Paul Institute, and we definitely appreciate your support. By the way, please hit like. We've got a bunch of you watching the show right now. Just hit the like button. It doesn't take much time or cost a penny, and it does help us get the show out. Over to you.
Very good. And I, too, would like to thank all our viewers for tuning in today, because it's very important to us. We did bring up some subjects on foreign policy and the Speaker of the House and the issues there, and they're going to continue, because a lot of time people, they say, it's economic problems that we have, and that's it, and they're not too interested in foreign policy. But there's no way you can separate foreign policy and the economic issues, because it is the place where we spend the most money, or not nearly, a high amount of money, and also the interest on paying the bills for supporting the military is out of control too. So a lot of what's going on now will come to a conclusion and an end. Now, in the story that we had there about Ian Smith was fantastic. It fell apart. He was charged, he was arrested, he was fined, and it was a good ending. And it doesn't always end that way, but it can if you have enough people who will support those issues. That's the whole thing, and that's why we want to encourage people to speak out. And I was taught one time, a long time ago, by Leonard Reed, that it's better if you don't rush yourself into some of these issues, but you ought to really make sure you understand the issue. And I'm still working on that, to understand the issue and try to improve the delivery of an issue that seems to be very unpopular. And I think that's approach that I continue to promote and ask people to look at. But to me, it's the issue of the day, and that is to learn how to do a good job in promoting the cause of liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.